take a second to think. Close your eyes and think. Now, while you're thinking, imagine you are in a concrete room. Nothing else is in there except for you and all of your thoughts. Now, you are facing the wall across from you. You notice in the center a little fire is starting to grow, it seems, which seems impossible because it's concrete, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, the entire wall is engulfed with fire. You hear a little girl chuckle behind you. So, out of instinct, you turn around and you look at her. And she's just a little girl with a big smirk on her face, grinning. And she's holding her arms straight out like this, facing the wall behind you where the fire started. She keeps on holding her arm out, and before you know it, the entire room is engulfed in flames. So, that little girl you had seen before, her name is Charlie McGee. She is the main character in the story I'm going to be talking to you about today. She, as you may have noticed, is very, very, very special. So special, indeed, that the government wants her in their own possession. This scene I had described to you actually happens in our story. It's not just something I made up. This happens around in the middle of the novel. So, this novel is Firestarter. It was wrote by Stephen King. And now, obviously, you have definitely heard of the story It from Stephen King. There's other common ones like Firestarter, Thinner, Christine. There's many, many, many stories that he has wrote that are very popular. And so my school actually does AR, and so I could tell you that the AR level is 5.8. It is worth 24 points, and it is an upper grade level. So an upper grade level means that, like, even though the content could be a 5.8 level, which means it's technically able for a little bit over halfway through 5th grade, it has more mature content, maybe swear words, more explicit scenes, stuff like that, just more maturity type things. So that's why it's listed as an upper grade. And if you haven't known, Stephen King's books generally fall underneath the science fiction, thriller, mystery, horror genres. Firestarter is most commonly underneath horror and science fiction. So, as I told you earlier, Charlie McGee is the main character in our story. She is a young girl, about 8 years old. She has pyrokinesis abilities, which literally means that she's able to set things aflame with her mind if she focuses hard enough. And she is the daughter of Andrew and Vicky McGee. Andrew McGee is a male. He is a participant in taking a hallucinogen called Lot 6, given by the Department of Scientific Intelligence, which is also called the Shop. And he has mind manipulation power. And he's, as I said before, the father of Charlie. And so, Charlie is the daughter of Vicky Tomlinson McGee, and Vicky and Andrew, while they were in college, they had taken a hallucinogen called Lot 6, and so it gave them their abilities. Vicky has mind-reading abilities, and so Vicky and Andrew, they had Charlie, and they didn't think Charlie was going to have abilities, but they found out that she did when she was very, very young. She set her teddy bear aflame without even touching it. So, as I said, Vicky and Andrew both did Lot 6. They were both in college. And the other main character in this story is John Rainbird. He is an agent slash assassin for the shop. He is a Vietnam veteran. He is obsessed with killing people. And he has this mindset of that he has, like, power over someone if he kills them, like, while looking into their eyes. And he wants to kill Charlie because he feels he will get her pyrokinesis abilities when he ends up dying later on into the past life. Kind of like a reincarnation thing. And so the setting kind of changes. So it starts with, like, Andrew and Charlie being on the run from the government. Like, after Vicky is killed by the shop while they are gone. And after that, there's another scene where they run from the shop agents while they're in New York. And then they end up living in a suburban in Ohio for a little bit before the shop gets to them and brings them to their location. And the quote starting point of the setting starts in 1969, and that was when Andrew and Vicky were taking hallucinogens, and it ends in 1980 when the whole story ends. I feel like people my age group, like 13 through 18, if they like mystery and horror, and also older groups like 25 through 40, maybe a little older, would like this book solely for the reason there's suspense, and yet it isn't super fantasy-like, like a fairy realm or something like that. And the realism is still kept, and it keeps people thinking. Other books like this one would be like Stephen King's book Christine, The Dark Tower, Salem's Lot, and It. Because they all kind of involve some form of fantasy, kind of not real life like, yet it does. And it's mixed in with horror and science fiction. I personally like this book a lot because it introduced me to all of Stephen King's books. I read this book when I was around 13 years old, and ever since I've loved his stories. His reigns include Firestarter, as I said before, involves some form of mystery while keeping you on edge. And so, I'm going to be reading you an excerpt on page 390, and starts on chapter 18 of part 3, and it says, "The power leaped crazily out of her, totally out of control. On its way to Rainbird, it vaporized the chunk of lead that otherwise would have buried itself in her brain. For a moment, it seemed that a high wind was rippling Rainbird's clothes, and those of Cap behind him, and that nothing else was happening. But it was not just clothes that were rippling. It was the flesh itself, rippling, running like tallow, and then being hurled off bones that were already charring and blackening and flaming." So, this excerpt was talking about when Rainbird had shot Andrew, kind of a spoiler, but when he shot Andrew in the head because he was trying to use his mind ability to control Charlie so Charlie wouldn't go with Rainbird. And so Rainbird had shot Andrew in the head, and then he shot him in the neck, and Andrew was on like his deathbed, and Charlie got so aggravated because obviously her dad got shot and he was going to die, that she started to burn the barn they were in. And like the rippling of flesh and clothes and stuff, her flames, whenever they would come through, it would be so strong and fast that it would almost make like a fire tornado, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I would highly recommend reading Firestarter and other books of Stephen King's, especially if you really like mystery and horror. Because I